The champagne flute trembled in my fingers as I watched another couple glide across the marble floor, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos a stark reminder that I didn't belong here. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel stretched before me like a gilded cage, crystal chandeliers casting diamond patterns across walls draped in burgundy silk, the scent of imported roses mingling with expensive cologne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I adjusted my grip on my violin case, the worn leather familiar and grounding against my palm. 24 years old, and I was still trying to outrun my father's ghost. The orchestra conductor had briefed us earlier: play background music, stay invisible, collect our fee, and leave. Simple enough for the other musicians who saw this as just another gig. But for me, this wasn't just about the $500 that would barely make a dent in the mountain of debt collectors' letters stuffing my mailbox. It was about surviving another month without the men my father owed finding me first. I'd been setting up my music stand in the corner designated for the string quartet when a waiter passed with a tray of champagne. My throat was dry from nerves, my hands shaking from the 3 cups of coffee that had substituted for lunch, because groceries were a luxury I couldn't afford this week. I reached for my water bottle tucked beside my case, but it was empty. "Miss?" A smooth voice interrupted my thoughts. "You look like you could use this." I looked up to find a man in his late 20s extending a champagne flute toward me. He was handsome in that effortless way some men are. Warm brown eyes, an easy smile, expensive suit that fit him like it was made for his frame specifically. Everything about him screamed money and confidence, the kind of person who'd never had to choose between paying electric bills or eating. "I don't usually drink before performing," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was already reaching for the glass. The crystal was cool against my fingers, and I could see tiny bubbles rising through the golden liquid. One drink wouldn't hurt. It might even calm the anxiety twisting my stomach into knots. "First time at one of these charity events?" he asked, leaning against the wall beside me with practiced casualness. "I'm Rohan, by the way. Rohan Patel. Priya Sharma." I brought the glass halfway to my lips, catching the faint scent of expensive champagne. "And yes, first time. Usually I'm playing in—" The glass disappeared from my hand so fast I barely registered the movement. 1 second I was mid-sentence, the champagne flute almost touching my lips. The next, a tall figure materialized beside me. His hand wrapped around the glass he'd just snatched away with such force that champagne sloshed over the rim and splattered across the marble floor. I stumbled backward, my shoulder blade hitting the wall. "What the— Don't drink that." The voice was low, dangerous, and completely at odds with the elegant surroundings. I looked up, and up, at the man who'd just robbed me of my drink like I was a child reaching for poison. He was taller than Rohan, broader in the shoulders, and dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe combined. But it wasn't the expensive tailoring that made my breath catch. It was his eyes. Dark, almost black, and currently fixed on me with an intensity that made the champagne-warm room feel suddenly glacial. "Excuse me?" I found my voice, along with an unexpected surge of indignation that temporarily overrode my usual conflict avoidance instincts. "Who do you think you are, grabbing things out of people's hands?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Up close, I could see the sharp angles of his face. Strong cheekbones, a straight nose that looked like it had been broken at least once, a mouth set in a hard line. There was a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Barely visible, but there. Everything about him radiated control and barely restrained violence. Someone who just saved you from making a very stupid mistake. He didn't look at me as he spoke. His gaze locked on Rohan with such cold fury that I instinctively shifted away from both of them. "Get out of here. Now." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what? You can't just—" "I wasn't talking to you." Finally, those dark eyes swung back to me, and I felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. "I was talking to my brother." The word brother hung in the air between us. I looked from the warm, easy-smiling Rohan to this cold, commanding stranger, and found it almost impossible to believe they shared DNA. Rohan's friendly expression had vanished, replaced by something harder, more calculated. "Lorenzo, you're being dramatic. I was just offering the lady a drink." Lorenzo. The name clicked into place with the force of recognition I wasn't expecting. Lorenzo Patel. I'd heard that name whispered in the halls of the music conservatory, murmured by the other musicians during smoke breaks, dropped with a mix of fear and fascination by the venue managers who booked our performances. The Lorenzo Patel who owned half the city's entertainment district, whose name appeared in business journals and crime podcasts with equal frequency, whose casino employed me for the next 3 months, whether I liked it or not. The man currently holding a champagne glass like it was a grenade, staring down his brother with murder in his eyes. "Your concern is touching, Lorenzo," Rohan said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "But I think the lady can make her own decisions about what she drinks. Not when you drugged it, she can't." Lorenzo's voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper, but I heard every word clearly. So did Rohan, whose expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise, then calculation, then a mask of innocent confusion. "You've lost your mind," Rohan said, but he was already backing away, hands raised in mock surrender. "Paranoia doesn't look good on you, brother." Lorenzo didn't respond. He simply stared until Rohan melted into the crowd of elegantly dressed guests, disappearing among the donors and socialites who'd paid thousands to attend this charity gala. Only then did those intense eyes return to me. "Drugged?" The word came out shakier than I intended. I was still pressed against the wall, my music stand forgotten, the violin case at my feet suddenly seeming like the only solid thing in a world that had tilted sideways. "That was drugged?" "Not for you." Lorenzo set the champagne glass on a nearby table with deliberate care, his movements controlled, precise. "He intended it for someone else. You were just convenient collateral damage." The casual way he said it, like I was a casualty in a war I didn't know I was fighting, sparked something hot and reckless in my chest. Maybe it was the adrenaline. Maybe it was the exhaustion from 3 jobs and 4 hours of sleep. Maybe it was the knowledge that I'd been seconds away from drinking something that could have destroyed me, saved only by this stranger's intervention. "Collateral damage?" I heard myself say, my voice stronger now, edged with an anger I hadn't known I possessed. "Is that what I am to you? Just another person who got in the way of your family's, drug delivery system?" Something shifted in his expression. Not quite surprise, but close, like I'd done something unexpected. "You should be thanking me," he said, but there was a question beneath the statement, like he was testing me. "Should I?" I crossed my arms, and I saw his gaze flicker down to the movement before returning to my face. "Maybe I should be asking why your brother has access to drugged champagne at a charity event, or why you knew about it, or why—" My voice was getting louder, and I forced myself to lower it, suddenly aware that we were drawing attention from nearby guests. "Why I should trust anything you say when you're clearly just as dangerous as he is." For 3 full seconds, Lorenzo Patel stared at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, nothing that warm, but an acknowledgement of something. "You're the new cellist," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. "The one Dimitri hired for the casino performances." The shift in conversation threw me. "Violinist, actually. And yes, I start next week." I straightened, trying to regain some semblance of dignity, despite the fact that I was arguing with a man who could probably make me disappear with a phone call. "Why? Planning to fire me before I even start?" "No." That almost smile appeared again, so brief I might have imagined it. "I'm deciding whether to increase security around you, or let you keep that sharp tongue and see how long you survive. I've survived worse than you, I promise." The words were out before I could stop them, propelled by some reckless part of me that apparently had a death wish. My father's death, the creditors, the threats. The nights I'd slept with a kitchen knife under my pillow because I didn't know who might come looking for payment. Lorenzo's expression changed, really changed this time. The cold mask cracked just enough for me to glimpse something underneath. Interest. Real, genuine interest. "Priya Sharma," he said, and I realized I hadn't told him my full name, which meant he already knew who I was. Had known before he'd snatched that glass from my hand. 24 years old, graduate of Westside Conservatory, currently performing with 3 different ensembles to pay off debts you didn't incur. He paused. Debts owed to some very dangerous people, some of whom work for me. My blood turned to ice. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know everything about people who enter my establishments." His voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather instead of admitting he'd investigated my entire life. "Your father made some unfortunate investments, some very unfortunate business arrangements. When he died, those obligations didn't disappear. I know what my father did." The words came out bitter. "I'm the one dealing with the consequences. Not anymore." I blinked. "What?" "Those debts, to the people who work for me." Lorenzo straightened his cuffs with deliberate precision, like we were discussing a simple business transaction. "Consider them forgiven." My mind went blank, then reeled. "I don't—" "What?" "You heard me." He turned to leave, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. "And Priya? The next time my brother offers you a drink, or anyone else you don't know, assume it's poisoned, because in my world, it probably is." He walked away, leaving me standing against the wall with my violin case at my feet, and the distinct feeling that my life had just been torn apart and reconstructed in the span of 5 minutes. I should have walked away. Should have grabbed my violin and left the gala, the casino contract, the whole situation. Instead, I watched Lorenzo Patel disappear into the crowd, my heart pounding, my hands shaking for entirely different reasons than before, because somewhere between the champagne glass being ripped from my hands and his casual announcement that he'd erased debts that had been destroying me for 2 years, I'd felt something I hadn't experienced in longer than I could remember. I'd felt seen. And that was far more dangerous than any drugged drink could ever be. The casino floor pulsed with controlled chaos, slot machines chiming their electronic symphonies, dice clattering across felt tables, the murmured conversations of high rollers placing bets that exceeded my annual income. I'd been performing here for 3 weeks, and I still hadn't adjusted to the assault of sensory overload that hit me every time I stepped through the employee's entrance. The Pearl Lotus Casino occupied prime real estate in the entertainment district, 5 stories of glass and steel that looked elegant from the outside and predatory from within. Everything was designed to disorient. No clocks, no windows in the gaming areas, lighting calibrated to make you lose track of time. I performed on the mezzanine level, where the atmosphere shifted from desperate gambling to refined entertainment. String quartet music for people who wore watches worth more than cars. I was early, as always. Anxiety had a way of making me pathologically punctual. I made my way through the service corridors toward the performer's lounge, my violin case a familiar weight against my hip. The hallways back here were all concrete and fluorescent lighting, stripped of the casino's glossy facade. This was where the machinery of Lorenzo Patel's empire operated. Security monitors, storage rooms, offices where I assumed deals were made that had nothing to do with legitimate business. I'd been avoiding thinking about Lorenzo for 3 weeks. That was a lie. I'd been thinking about him constantly while actively avoiding any actual encounters. True to his word, the debts had vanished. The threatening letters stopped arriving. The men who'd shown up at my apartment demanding payments that grew larger each month. They disappeared like they'd never existed. I'd called every creditor on my list, prepared for the catch, the trap, the new terms that would bind me tighter than before. But there was nothing. Accounts marked as settled. Balances 0. When I'd pressed for details, I'd been met with uncomfortable silences and vague assurances that the situation had been handled. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like I'd traded one kind of debt for another, more dangerous kind. Priya, there you are. Isabel, the violist in our quartet, waved me over to the lounge. She was already in performance attire, black dress, hair swept into an elegant updo. Did you hear about the schedule change? I set down my case, unzipping it with practiced efficiency. What schedule change? We're not performing on the mezzanine tonight. Lorenzo wants us in the Sapphire Room. She said his name casually, like he was just another venue manager, instead of the man who owned this building and possibly controlled half the crime in the city. Some kind of private party. My hands stilled on my violin. The Sapphire Room? I know, right? Apparently it's where he entertains VIP clients. We're getting paid double. Isabel checked her reflection in the mirror, adjusting an earring. I heard he only opens that room for really important people. Politicians, business moguls, the kind of people who... Who what? I asked when she trailed off. She met my eyes in the mirror. The kind of people who make other people disappear if they're unhappy with the entertainment. That's comforting, I muttered, running my fingers along my violin strings, checking the tuning by muscle memory. The wood was smooth and warm, the only thing I owned that had belonged to my father that didn't carry the taint of his mistakes. He'd bought it for me when I was 16, before the gambling, before the debts, when he still believed music would save me from the life he'd built. He'd been wrong about a lot of things, but he'd been right about the violin. The other two members of our quartet arrived, James on second violin and Marcus on cello. We ran through a quick warm-up in the lounge, our instruments blending in the familiar harmonies we'd perfected over months of performances. This was the part I loved, the part that made everything else bearable. When I played, I wasn't Priya Sharma with crushing debt and a dead father's legacy. I was just the music, just the notes flowing through my fingers. A security guard appeared in the doorway, one of Lorenzo's men, judging by the expensive suit and the earpiece barely visible beneath his short hair. The Sapphire Room is ready for you. Follow me, please. We gathered our instruments and followed him through a maze of corridors I'd never seen before, each turn taking us deeper into the casino's exclusive areas. The carpet grew thicker, the lighting more subtle. Art that probably cost millions hung on walls. Everything whispered money and power and danger. The Sapphire Room lived up to its name. Deep blue velvet covered the walls. Crystal chandeliers threw prismatic light across a space designed for maybe 50 people maximum. A bar stretched along one wall, bottles of liquor I couldn't pronounce gleaming like jewels. The guests were already arriving, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns that cost more than my semester at conservatory. And in the corner, partially hidden in shadow, Lorenzo Patel stood with a glass of whiskey, watching the room with the focused attention of a predator assessing prey. Our eyes met across the space, and I felt that same jolt of recognition from the gala. He didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge me at all beyond that single moment of eye contact. Then his attention shifted to the woman who'd just entered. Tall, stunning, wearing a red dress that looked painted on. She crossed directly to him, placing a possessive hand on his arm. I looked away, focusing on setting up my music stand with unnecessary concentration. "Who's that?" Isabel whispered, positioning herself beside me. "With Lorenzo." "How should I know?" I arranged my sheet music with hands that wanted to shake but refused to give them permission. "That's Sophia Romano," Marcus supplied, settling behind his cello. "Daughter of the Romano family. Rumor is she and Lorenzo are engaged, merging two of the city's most powerful families." Of course he was engaged. Of course the man who'd saved me from drugged champagne and erased my debts had a fiancée who looked like she belonged on magazine covers. Why had I expected anything different? I raised my violin to my shoulder, using the familiar weight and position to center myself. This was just a job. Lorenzo Patel was just my employer. What he did with his personal life was none of my business. We began to play Vivaldi's Four Seasons, because apparently these people enjoyed cliches with their cocktails. My fingers moved through the familiar passages, while my mind cataloged details I shouldn't have been noticing. The way Lorenzo's jaw tightened when Sophia whispered something in his ear. The cold, assessing look several men in the room kept giving him. The tension beneath the elegant surface, like everyone was playing a game with rules I couldn't see. Halfway through the second movement, I felt it, that prickling awareness that comes from being watched. I glanced up from my music and found Lorenzo staring directly at me, whiskey glass forgotten in his hand. Sophia was talking to someone else now, and he'd stepped slightly away from the crowd. He was listening to the music. Really listening. Not the background appreciation of wealthy patrons, but the focused attention of someone hearing every note. Our gazes locked, and I made a decision that was either brave or monumentally stupid. I changed the piece. Not dramatically, we were still playing Vivaldi. But I shifted from the score we'd rehearsed to a variation I'd learned years ago, one that added complexity and shadow to the familiar melody. James and Marcus, experienced enough to follow my lead, adjusted immediately. Isabel shot me a questioning look, but adapted. The music transformed. What had been pleasant background became something darker, more intense. I watched Lorenzo's expression shift. Surprise, then something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that I'd just broken the rules for him specifically. When the movement ended, the scattered applause was perfunctory. But Lorenzo raised his glass to me, just slightly, a private acknowledgement that no one else in the room would have noticed. Then Sophia reclaimed his attention, and I returned to safer, more predictable music. We played for 2 hours, taking only brief breaks between sets. During the second break, I slipped out to the corridor for air, my shoulders aching from tension I couldn't quite release. The hallway was blessedly empty, and I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. That was interesting. I jerked upright, my eyes flying open. Lorenzo stood 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. What was interesting? I managed, proud that my voice stayed steady. The variation. Most musicians stick to what they're told to play. He moved closer, and I fought the urge to step back. You took a risk. I thought that's what you paid for. Entertainment. I pay for obedience. He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle. What I got was challenge. Should I apologize? I met his eyes, refusing to back down even though every survival instinct screamed at me to be careful, be small, be forgettable. No. That almost smile appeared again. You should do it again next week. I'm performing next week? Every week. Same room, same time. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, extending it toward me. Your payment for tonight, and a contract amendment. You'll be performing exclusively for my private events from now on. I took the envelope, feeling the weight of cash and paper inside. What if I don't want to perform exclusively for you? Then you're free to leave. Lorenzo's voice was perfectly calm, perfectly reasonable. But the debts I cleared, those creditors still exist. And if you're not under my protection anymore, they might remember what you owe them. Ice flooded my veins. That's blackmail. That's reality. He stepped back, giving me space I suddenly didn't want. You think I erased those debts out of charity? I made an investment, Priya. I expect returns. What kind of returns? The question came out harder than intended. Because if you think... I think you're talented. He cut me off, his expression darkening. I think having you perform at my events increases their value. That's all. That's all? I laughed, the sound bitter. You're telling me you paid off 2 years of debt just for background music? I'm telling you that you interest me. The admission hung between us, heavy with implication. And things that interest me, I protect, whether you want that protection or not. Before I could respond, Sophia appeared in the corridor, her heels clicking against marble. Lorenzo, darling, the Kozlovs are asking for you. Her eyes flickered to me dismissively, categorizing me as hired help and therefore irrelevant. The entertainment should be back at their position. I was just clarifying Miss Sharma's contract, Lorenzo said smoothly, his voice cooling several degrees. She'll be ready momentarily. Sophia's lips tightened almost imperceptibly. She wasn't stupid. She'd caught the shift in his tone, the way he'd used my name instead of just calling me the violinist. Of course, don't keep them waiting too long. She turned and walked away, her dress swirling around her legs like blood. Your fiancé? I asked, unable to stop myself. Convenient label for a business arrangement. Lorenzo watched Sophia's retreating form with all the warmth of someone examining a contract. The Romano family wants access to my distribution networks. My mother wants grandchildren and social legitimacy. Everyone gets what they want. Except you. His eyes snapped back to me, and I saw I'd surprised him again. What makes you think I'm not getting what I want? Because you look at her like she's a chess piece, not a person you chose. I should have stopped talking, but the words kept coming. And you look at me like I'm a puzzle you can't solve. For a long moment, Lorenzo said nothing. Then, go back to your quartet. We'll discuss your contract next week. He left before I could respond, and I stood alone in the corridor, holding an envelope full of money I hadn't earned, feeling like I'd just stepped further into a trap I didn't understand. When I finally returned to the Sapphire room, Isabel grabbed my arm. Where were you? Marcus almost had to play a solo. Sorry, just needed air. I raised my violin, settling it against my shoulder, finding my position like returning home. For the rest of the night, I felt Lorenzo's attention on me like a physical weight. Every glance, every subtle shift in his posture. I tracked it all while pretending to focus only on the music. Sophia stayed at his side, beautiful and confident, and completely unaware that her fiancé was watching the hired violinist with an intensity that should have been impossible to miss. When the event finally ended, and we packed our instruments, I opened the envelope he'd given me. Inside was 3 times my usual payment, along with a contract addendum written in precise legal language. Exclusive performances for Lorenzo Patel's private events. Double my current rate. A clause about security provisions that made my stomach clench. And at the bottom, in handwriting instead of printed text, you're safer here than you think. LP. I should have torn up the contract. Should have walked away from Lorenzo and his dangerous world and his impossible attention. Instead, I signed it. Because for the first time since my father died, I felt like I mattered to someone. Even if that someone was the most dangerous man I'd ever met. The thing about secrets is that they have weight. They accumulate in your chest like stones, pressing against your ribs until breathing becomes an exercise in careful control. 4 months into my exclusive contract with Lorenzo Patel, I'd collected enough secrets to build a monument to my own stupidity. I knew that the Sapphire Room hosted more than just business dinners. I'd performed while men discussed shipments and territories in voices they didn't bother to lower, confident that musicians were part of the furniture, present, but irrelevant. I'd watched Lorenzo negotiate deals with handshakes that looked friendly, and words that carried threats. I'd seen money change hands in amounts that made my cleared debts look like pocket change. I knew that Rohan appeared at these events occasionally, always charming, always smiling, always watching his brother with an expression I couldn't quite read. Hatred, maybe. Or envy. Possibly both. I knew that Sophia Romano spent more time on her phone than talking to Lorenzo, and that her father attended these gatherings more often than she did. his presence a reminder that their engagement was political theater. And I knew, though I'd tried desperately not to acknowledge it, that Lorenzo watched me during every performance with an attention that had nothing to do with the music. "You're distracted today," Lorenzo said, and I nearly dropped my violin. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I'd arrived early to rehearse in the Sapphire Room before that evening's event. I thought I was alone. Apparently, I'd been wrong. He emerged from the shadowed corner near the bar, where he must have been sitting for God knows how long, watching me practice. "I wasn't expecting an audience," I managed, lowering my violin. Clearly. Lorenzo crossed the room with that predatory grace I'd started cataloging in my nightmares. He wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing forearms that suggested he did more than push paper from behind a desk. "The Brahms is giving you trouble." "I've been playing Brahms since I was 15. It's not giving me trouble." "Then why did you repeat the same 16 bars 4 times, each time getting progressively more frustrated?" He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. Casual. Unthreatening. Except nothing about Lorenzo Patel was truly casual or unthreatening. I set my violin in its case with deliberate care, using the time to collect my scattered composure. Maybe I just wanted to perfect it. Maybe. He moved to the bar, pulling out a bottle of water and tossing it to me. I caught it reflexively. "Or maybe you've been sleeping poorly for the past week, which is affecting your concentration." The observation was too specific, too accurate. "Have you been watching my apartment?" "I've been ensuring your safety." He poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter, the amber liquid catching the light. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I twisted the cap off the water bottle, suddenly aware of how dry my throat was. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks an awful lot like surveillance." "Your father's creditors," Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to that dangerous softness I'd learned meant he was being deadly serious. "The ones whose debts I cleared. Some of them weren't happy about the arrangement." My hand tightened on the water bottle. "What does that mean?" "It means that 3 weeks ago, 2 of them decided to approach you anyway. To test whether my protection was genuine or just talk." He took a slow sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving my face. "They didn't get within a block of your apartment before my security intercepted them." I sat down on the nearest chair before my legs could give out. "You never told me." "Because there was nothing to tell. The threat was handled." Lorenzo settled into the chair across from me, close enough that our knees almost touched. But it confirmed what I suspected. "You're a target, Priya. Not because of anything you did, but because of what you represent." "What do I represent?" The question came out shakier than I intended. "Vulnerability in my organization." His gaze held mine, unflinching. "People see that I've taken an interest in you. They think that makes you a weakness they can exploit. You haven't taken an interest in me. I'm just your employee." Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. We both knew it was a lie. Lorenzo leaned forward, elbows on his knees, close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Do you know how many musicians I employ across my properties?" 73. "Do you know how many of them I've personally cleared debts for?" 1. "That doesn't mean..." "Do you know how many of them I've watched practice when I should be handling actual business? How many of them I think about when I'm negotiating with the Kozlovs or dealing with Romano family politics?" His voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. 1. The word hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to examine. "You're engaged," I said, because it was the only defense I had left. "I'm trapped in a business arrangement that benefits everyone except me." Lorenzo sat back, creating distance I immediately missed. "Sophia and I have an understanding. We present a united front publicly. Privately, we live separate lives." That sounds lonely. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that I'd focused on that instead of the opportunity his words presented. It's practical. Emotion is a liability in my world. Is that why you don't smile? The question escaped before I could stop it. Because emotion is a liability? I smile. He sounded almost offended. No, you do that thing where the corner of your mouth twitches slightly. That's not a smile. That's a muscular spasm disguised as human emotion. For 3 full seconds, Lorenzo stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. A real, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. It lasted maybe 5 seconds before he caught himself, but I saw it. Proof that beneath the cold exterior was someone capable of actual joy. See? I said, unable to suppress my own smile. Was that so difficult? Apparently more difficult than performing invasive surveillance on my employees. But there was warmth in his voice now, a softness I'd never heard before. You're dangerous, Priya Sharma. Me? I'm the least dangerous person in this room. That's what makes you dangerous. Lorenzo stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. The late afternoon sun painted him in gold and shadow. Everyone else I deal with has weapons, threats, armies. You have music and sarcasm, and somehow that's more effective at getting past my defenses than anything they could deploy. I should have let it go. Should have deflected with another joke, maintained the careful distance I'd been cultivating for 4 months. Instead, I asked, "What happened to you?" He went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're 30 years old, and you act like emotion might actually kill you. Something made you that way." I stood, moving to stand beside him at the window. "Was it your family, the business, something else? Does it matter?" "It matters if you want me to understand why you're so determined to protect me while simultaneously keeping me at arm's length." Lorenzo's reflection in the window showed the war happening behind his carefully controlled expression. Finally, he spoke. "When I was 19, I fell in love. Completely, stupidly in love with a woman who had nothing to do with my world. She was studying art history. She wanted to open a gallery. She made me believe I could be something other than what my family built me to be. Past tense. Everything was past tense. My chest tightened. What happened to her? My father's enemies found out about her, used her to get to me. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. They sent me pieces of her paintings, then pieces of her. By the time I found where they were keeping her, she'd been dead for 3 days. Horror crashed through me. Lorenzo, I killed every single person involved. It took me 6 months, but I found them all." He turned from the window to face me directly. And then I made a decision. Never again. Never would I give anyone that kind of leverage. Never would I care about someone enough that their death could destroy me. That's not living. That's just existing. It's surviving. Lorenzo's hand came up, hovering near my face but not quite touching. Until you walked into my casino with your secondhand violin case and your sharp tongue, and suddenly surviving doesn't feel like enough anymore. My breath caught. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because you don't feel it too. His hand finally made contact, fingers brushing my jaw with devastating gentleness. Because you haven't been going home at night and replaying every word we've said to each other, trying to figure out if this is insanity or the first honest thing either of us has experienced in years. Lorenzo, The words died in my throat because I didn't know what to say. Everything he described was exactly what I'd been doing, every night for 4 months. "Tell me I'm wrong," he said softly. "Tell me you don't feel this, and I'll never mention it again. We'll keep this professional, safe, distant." I should have told him he was wrong, should have protected us both from what this could become. Instead, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. His response was immediate, one hand sliding into my hair, the other wrapping around my waist, pulling me against him with barely restrained desperation. He kissed like he did everything else, intensely, completely, like nothing existed beyond this moment. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against mine. "This is a terrible idea." "The worst," I agreed. "People will try to use you against me. People have been trying to use me my whole life. I'm still here." He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. "If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back to professional distance. I won't be able to pretend I don't care about you. And in my world, that makes you a target. Then we'll be targets together." I tried for brave, but my voice shook slightly. "I'm tired of being careful, Lorenzo. I'm tired of playing it safe and small and forgettable." "You've never been forgettable." His thumb traced my lower lip with reverent attention. "Not from the moment you called me a brutish thug in an expensive suit. I called you a brute in a fancy suit. There's a difference." "Is there?" That almost smile appeared, but this time it reached his eyes, transformed his entire face into something younger, lighter. "Yes. One implies you have fashion sense along with your violent tendencies." He kissed me again, and this time it was softer, slower, a promise instead of a question. When the door to the sapphire room opened, we sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Rohan stood in the doorway, that easy smile on his face, but his eyes were calculating as they moved from Lorenzo to me and back again. "Am I interrupting something?" His tone was light, but there was an edge underneath. "What do you want, Rohan?" Lorenzo's voice had gone cold again. All traces of softness vanished. "Just checking on the arrangements for tonight's event. Father wants to make sure everything is perfect for the Kozlov meeting." Rohan's gaze flickered to me. "Miss Sharma, you look flushed. Feeling well?" "Fine," I managed, trying to slow my racing heart. "Just finished rehearsing." "Of course." Rohan's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know, that drink I offered you at the gala. I never did apologize for Lorenzo's dramatic intervention. He has a tendency to see threats where none exist." The memory of Lorenzo's words crashed back. "Not when you drugged it." I looked between the brothers, reading the tension that hummed beneath their civilized words. "I should get ready for tonight's performance," I said, moving toward my violin case. "Excuse me." As I packed up my instrument, I felt both brothers watching me. Lorenzo with protective intensity, Rohan with something darker. I'd just made everything infinitely more complicated. And the terrifying part was, I didn't regret it at all. 6 months. That's how long Lorenzo and I managed to keep our relationship hidden in plain sight. To the outside world, I was still just his exclusive performer, the violinist who played at his private events, who commanded a higher fee because of her talent, nothing more. We were careful, professional during events. I never arrived at his penthouse through the front entrance. We didn't speak in public beyond what was necessary. But in the hours between midnight and dawn, when the casino floor below finally quieted and the city outside his windows glowed with artificial stars, I learned who Lorenzo Patel really was beneath the armor. I learned that he played piano, though he claimed to be terrible at it. He wasn't. He was just out of practice, his fingers stumbling over keys that once flowed as naturally as breathing. His mother had taught him before she died, before his father transformed their family business from semi-legitimate investments into the empire Lorenzo now controlled. I learned that he read philosophy texts in the original Greek because languages helped him think clearly. that he'd wanted to be an architect before family obligation redirected his path, that he still sketched buildings in notebooks he kept hidden, designs for structures he'd never build. I learned that beneath the cold control was someone desperately lonely, who'd convinced himself that isolation was strength. And I learned what it felt like to fall completely, irrevocably in love with someone I absolutely shouldn't love. "You're thinking too loudly," Lorenzo murmured against my hair. We were in his bed, the city spreading beneath us through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dawn was still an hour away, which meant I had time before I needed to slip back to my apartment and maintain our careful fiction. "I'm thinking about how impossible this is," I admitted, tracing patterns across his chest, "and how I don't care that it's impossible." His arm tightened around me. "Priya, I know all the reasons this can't work." I tilted my head to look at him. "You're still engaged to Sophia. Your world is dangerous. Loving you makes me a target. I've heard the lecture. And yet you're still here. And yet I'm still here." I kissed him softly. "So either I'm incredibly brave or monumentally stupid. Both, probably." But he was smiling, that real smile I'd become addicted to seeing, the one that only appeared when we were alone, when he let himself be Lorenzo instead of the feared crime lord. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, expecting a reminder about tomorrow's rehearsal. Instead, I found a text from an unknown number. "Ask him about the gala. Ask him what he really saved you from. Someone who wants you to know the truth." My blood turned cold. Lorenzo noticed immediately, sitting up. "What's wrong?" "I don't know." I showed him the phone. "What does this mean?" His expression darkened as he read the message. "It means someone's trying to cause problems." He took the phone from my hand, studying it. "Did you recognize the number?" "No." "Lorenzo, what truth are they talking about?" "There is no truth. Just someone attempting to manipulate you." He handed back the phone. "Delete it. Don't respond." "But what if—" "Priya." He cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Whatever they send, it's designed to make you doubt me, to drive a wedge between us. That's how my enemies operate. They can't attack me directly, so they attack the people I care about. The people I care about." He'd never said it quite so clearly before. The words should have made me feel safer. Instead, the text message had planted a seed of unease I couldn't quite shake. Over the next week, I received 3 more messages, each one more specific. The drink wasn't meant for someone else. It was meant for you. He wanted you indebted to him. Check his security footage from that night. See how long he was watching you before his brother approached. Ask yourself, why would he clear debts for a stranger? What did he really want in return? I deleted each one without responding, but I couldn't delete the questions they raised. Because they touched on doubts I'd been suppressing for months. The improbability of Lorenzo's intervention, the convenience of my rescue, the way he'd already known everything about me when we met. On a Tuesday afternoon, after receiving the 4th message, I made a decision I knew I'd regret. I went to see Rohan. I found him at one of the smaller casinos he managed for the Patel Empire, a place called the Gilt Lily that catered to mid-level gamblers and tourists who wanted to feel dangerous without actual risk. He was in his office, reviewing accounts with that easy charm that made him seem approachable in ways Lorenzo never was. Priya Sharma. He looked up from his paperwork, genuine surprise crossing his features. This is unexpected. Does my brother know you're here? No. I closed the door behind me, suddenly uncertain if this was bravery or stupidity. I need to ask you about the gala. 6 months ago. Something shifted in Rohan's expression. What about it? The champagne you gave me, the one Lorenzo took away. I crossed my arms, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. I need to know the truth. Was it really meant for someone else? Rohan leaned back in his chair, studying me with those warm brown eyes that somehow managed to look both sympathetic and calculating. You've been getting messages, haven't you? How did you... Because I've been sending them. He stood, moving around the desk. And before you run back to Lorenzo, hear me out. Please. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot. Why would you send those messages? Because someone needs to tell you the truth before you get hurt, or worse. Rohan pulled out his phone, navigating to a folder. That night at the gala, Lorenzo didn't just happen to be nearby when I offered you that drink. He'd been watching you for 20 minutes. Waiting. He turned the phone to show me security footage. Grainy, black and white, but clear enough. There was Lorenzo, partially hidden behind a pillar, his eyes tracking my every movement across the ballroom. Watching as I set up my music stand, as I spoke with the other musicians, as Rohan approached with champagne. The drug in that glass? Rohan continued. It was real, but it was never meant for anyone else. Lorenzo put it there. Told me to offer it to you. He wanted you disoriented, vulnerable, so he could swoop in and play the hero. The world tilted sideways. That's not... He wouldn't he? Rohan's voice was gentle, sympathetic. Think about it, Priya. He knew everything about you before you met. Your debts, your father's history. Don't you wonder how he had that information so readily available? He said he investigates everyone who works for him. He does. But he'd been investigating you for weeks before you ever set foot in his casino. Rohan pulled up another file. Bank records, surveillance photos, interviews with your neighbors. He built a complete profile. Then he engineered the perfect scenario. Rescue you from a threat he created. Clear your debts so you'd feel obligated. Bind you to him with an exclusive contract. My hands were shaking. Why are you telling me this? Because I've watched Lorenzo manipulate people my entire life. He's brilliant at it. He finds their weaknesses and exploits them, wraps control in layers of protection and care until they don't even realize they're trapped. Rohan's expression hardened. My brother doesn't love you, Priya. You're just another chess piece in whatever game he's playing. I don't believe you. But my voice cracked on the words. You don't have to believe me. Believe the evidence. He gestured to his phone. I can send you all the files, all the proof, every manipulation, every calculated move. Or you can walk out of here and pretend we never had this conversation. Go back to him and live in the beautiful lie he's constructed. I should have walked out. Should have gone straight to Lorenzo and demanded the truth from him directly. Instead, I said, send me the files. Rohan's phone buzzed in his hand. Already done. Check your email. He moved closer, his expression softening. I know this hurts. I know you care about him. But you deserve better than being someone's project, Priya. You deserve someone who chose you for you, not because you fit perfectly into their plans. I backed toward the door, my mind reeling. I need to go. Wait. Rohan caught my arm gently. One more thing. Ask Lorenzo about the woman who died, the one he supposedly loved. Ask him what really happened to her. What does that mean? Just ask him. See if he tells you the truth. Rohan released me. And be careful. My brother protects his investments very carefully if he thinks you're becoming a liability. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I left the Gilt Lily and walked for 3 hours through the city, my phone heavy in my pocket with all the files Rohan had sent. Files I couldn't bring myself to open, but couldn't bring myself to delete either. By the time I reached Lorenzo's building, night had fallen. I used the private elevator he'd given me access to, riding up to the penthouse with my heart in my throat. Lorenzo was at his piano when I entered. playing something melancholy and complex. He stopped mid-phrase when he saw my face. What happened? He was on his feet immediately, crossing to me. Priya, what's wrong? I need you to tell me the truth. My voice came out steady despite the trembling in my hands. About the gala, about the champagne, about everything. His expression shuddered. What did Rohan say to you? So you know I saw him. I laughed, the sound bitter. Of course you know. You probably have people watching me constantly, making sure your investment is protected. It's not like that. Then what's it like? Because from where I'm standing, I'm starting to feel like the only person who didn't know I was part of some elaborate manipulation. I pulled out my phone, opening the folder of files. Were you watching me before the gala? Did you engineer that entire scenario? Lorenzo's silence was answer enough. My God, I whispered. It's true. All of it is true. Let me explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 6 months? That everything between us has been built on manipulation and control? Tears were streaming down my face now, and I hated myself for them. You made me believe you saved me. You made me believe this was real. It is real. Lorenzo reached for me, but I stepped back. Whatever Rohan told you, whatever he showed you, yes, I watched you before the gala. Yes, I researched you. But the drug in that champagne was Rohan's idea, not mine. When I saw him offer you that glass, I didn't think. I just reacted. All I knew was that he was going to hurt you, and I couldn't let that happen. How convenient. The hero and the villain both happen to be related. Priya, please! Was the woman you told me about even real? The question came out harsh. The one who died? Or was that just another story designed to manipulate me? Something cracked in Lorenzo's expression. Pain so raw it made me want to take back the words. Elena was real. Her death was real. And it destroyed me in ways I still haven't recovered from. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe this. He closed the distance between us, his hands framing my face with desperate gentleness. Believe that whatever I've done, whatever mistakes I've made, my feelings for you are real. I love you, Priya. I'm in love with you in ways that terrify me. Love doesn't look like control. You're right. He released me, stepping back. I've spent my entire life controlling everything and everyone around me, because it's the only way I know how to protect the things I care about. But with you, I don't want control. I want... He stopped, struggling for words. I want to deserve you, and I know I don't. Not yet. I stood there, torn between the evidence on my phone and the man before me who looked like he was breaking apart. I need time, I finally said. I need to think. Take all the time you need. Lorenzo's voice was rough. But don't disappear on me, Priya. Don't run. We can work through this. I left without answering, taking the elevator back down to street level. In the lobby, I pulled out my phone and opened the files Rohan had sent, and discovered that half of them were fabricated. The surveillance footage had been edited. I could see the timestamps jump, the angles shift in ways that didn't quite match reality. The bank records were genuine, but taken out of context. The interviews with my neighbors were all dated after I'd started working for Lorenzo, not before. Rohan had woven truth with lies so skillfully that separating them would require time and expertise I didn't have. I stood in Lorenzo's lobby, holding proof of manipulation from both brothers, and realized I was trapped between two different versions of the truth. And I had no idea which one to believe. I didn't perform at the casino for 3 weeks. I sent a polite email claiming illness, then disappeared into my apartment like it could protect me from the impossible choice I was facing. Lorenzo respected my request for space, or at least he didn't show up at my door. But flowers arrived every other day. Not ostentatious arrangements, just single stems of increasingly obscure varieties, each with a card in his precise handwriting. Monkshood. Beware. A deadly foe is near. You were right not to trust easily. White chrysanthemum. Truth. I owe you complete honesty. Whenever you're ready. Red carnation. My heart aches. Because it does. The flowers accumulated on my windowsill. A strange garden of contrition from a man who probably didn't know the language of flowers before me, which meant he'd researched it specifically for this purpose. On the 19th day, I received a different kind of message. Not from Lorenzo or Rohan, but from an unknown number. If you want the truth about what happened 6 months ago, meet me at Café Noir, 3 p.m. tomorrow. Come alone. Someone who was there, I should have ignored it. Should have blocked the number and stayed in my self-imposed exile. Instead, I went. Café Noir was one of those deliberately bohemian places in the arts district. Mismatched furniture, students hunched over laptops, the smell of over-roasted coffee and artistic pretension. I arrived 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table with sightlines to both entrances. At exactly 3 p.m., a woman in her 40s approached my table. Well-dressed, professional, with the kind of confidence that came from years of navigating dangerous spaces. She sat without asking permission. Priya Sharma. Thank you for coming. She pulled out her phone, laying it face down on the table between us. My name is Natasha Volkov. I work for the Kozlov family. My stomach dropped. The Kozlovs were one of Lorenzo's primary rivals, Russian organized crime with tentacles throughout the city's underground economy. I should leave, I said, already half standing. Please, hear me out. Natasha's voice was calm, reasonable. I'm not here to threaten you or recruit you. I'm here because you deserve to know what actually happened at that gala. And why would the Kozlovs care about what happened to me? Because we were the intended targets that night. The drugged champagne. It was meant for Mikhail Kozlov's daughter. Rohan Patel had been courting her, gaining her trust. The plan was to drug her, create a compromising situation, use it as leverage against her father. I sank back into my chair. How do you know this? Because we have sources inside the Patel organization, and because Lorenzo Patel discovered the plan about an hour before the gala started. Natasha pulled up a photo on her phone, security footage from what looked like a parking garage. Lorenzo and Rohan, clearly arguing. No audio, but their body language screamed confrontation. This was taken 90 minutes before you arrived at the gala, Natasha continued. Lorenzo confronted Rohan, told him to call off the plan. Rohan refused, said it was too late. Everything was already in motion. They fought, actually physically fought. Lorenzo won, obviously. Told Rohan if he went through with it, there would be consequences. But he still gave me the champagne. Because Rohan is clever. Natasha swiped to another photo. Rohan in the ballroom, looking directly at a security camera. He knew Lorenzo would be watching. He deliberately chose you instead of his original target, knowing it would force Lorenzo to intervene publicly and reveal that he'd been watching you. It was a move designed to either expose Lorenzo's interest in you or make him look paranoid and controlling. My mind raced, recontextualizing everything I thought I knew. Why are you telling me this? Because Rohan Patel is trying to start a war between our families and the Patels. He's been feeding information to our rivals, manipulating situations, all while positioning himself to take over when Lorenzo falls. Natasha leaned forward. And his current strategy involves destroying Lorenzo's relationship with you. Make you think Lorenzo is controlling and manipulative. Make Lorenzo think you've chosen to believe Rohan's lies. Push you both into positions you can't walk back from. I still don't understand why the Kozlovs care. Because despite being criminals, we prefer stability. Lorenzo Patel is ruthless, but predictable. He keeps his word, maintains clear boundaries. Rohan is chaos. If he takes control of the Patel empire, everyone suffers. Natasha stood. I've given you information. What you do with it is your choice. But if you love Lorenzo Patel, I suggest you stop playing into his brother's hands. She left before I could respond, walking out of the cafe like she'd just discussed the weather instead of dismantling my entire understanding of the past 6 months. I sat there for an hour, staring at nothing, trying to piece together truth from lies. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called Lorenzo. He answered on the first ring. Priya. Just my name, but I heard everything in it. Hope, fear, desperate need. I need to see you, not at your place, somewhere neutral. Where? The Sapphire Room. Tonight after closing. Just you, no security, no witnesses. Priya, if this is... Please, Lorenzo, trust me. A long pause, then, I'll be there. I arrived at the casino at 2 a.m., using my employee access to slip through the service entrance. The main floor was closed, slot machines dark and silent. The Sapphire Room was on the 3rd floor, accessible through a private elevator that required a code Lorenzo had given me months ago. He was already there when I arrived, standing by the windows that overlooked the city. He'd changed from his usual suit into dark jeans and a simple black shirt. No armor, no pretense. You look terrible, I said softly. I haven't slept in 3 weeks. He turned to face me, and I saw the truth of it in the shadows under his eyes. Every time I close my eyes, I see you walking away. I talked to someone today, someone who gave me a very different version of what happened at the gala. His expression tightened. Who? Does it matter? What matters is that I've spent 3 weeks drowning in different stories, trying to figure out which one is true. I moved closer. So I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to answer honestly. No deflection, no protection, just truth. All right. Did you drug the champagne Rohan gave me? No. Did you know he was planning to drug someone that night? Yes. About 90 minutes before the gala. I tried to stop him. Did you research me before we met? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Yes. Why? Because 3 months before the gala, your name appeared on a list my financial analysts created. People with debts to organizations we're connected to. When I saw your profile, musician, talented, working 3 jobs to pay off your father's mistakes, He stopped, struggling. I wanted to know more. So I kept tabs on you. Made sure the creditors didn't get too aggressive. And when I saw you were performing at the gala, I decided to attend. To meet me? To see if you were real. His voice dropped. I'd been watching surveillance footage of you performing, reading reviews of your concerts, building this image in my head of who you were. And I needed to know if the reality matched. That's obsessive. I know. But not manipulative. Not the same as engineering our meeting. I moved closer still. Did you tell Rohan to offer me that champagne? Absolutely not. When I saw him approaching you with that glass, I knew what he was doing. Forcing my hand, making me choose between protecting you and maintaining my cover. Lorenzo's hands clenched at his sides. I chose you. I'll always choose you. I stood in front of him now, close enough to touch. I love you, but I need to know, is this real, or am I just another acquisition in your empire? You're the only thing in my life that was never about acquisition. He finally reached for me, his hands trembling slightly as they cupped my face. You're the only choice I made because I wanted to, not because it was strategic or necessary. And that terrifies me. Good. I kissed him, pouring 3 weeks of confusion and fear and desperate need into it. Because I'm terrified too. When we broke apart, I stayed in his arms, my forehead against his chest. Rohan is trying to destroy us, and he's very good at it. I know. I've been investigating. He's been planning this for longer than either of us realized. Lorenzo's arms tightened around me. But knowing his endgame doesn't mean I know how to stop him. Then we figure it out together. I looked up at him. No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. If we're doing this, we do it as partners. Something shifted in his expression, relief and fear in equal measure. You're sure? Once you see the full scope of what I do, what my world really involves. I've been performing in that world for 6 months, Lorenzo. I'm not naive. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But I won't be kept in the dark like some delicate thing that might break. I'm stronger than you think. I know you are. That's part of why I love you. He kissed my forehead. All right, partners. Starting now, you know everything. We spent the rest of the night in the Sapphire Room, Lorenzo walking me through the full extent of his empire, the legitimate businesses that barely broke even and existed primarily to launder money from the profitable illegal operations, the territories controlled through violence or intimidation, the alliances maintained through mutually assured destruction, the careful balance he maintained between appearing civilized and being feared, and the war Rohan was quietly orchestrating, feeding information to rivals, manipulating situations, positioning himself to take over an empire he believed should have been his from the start. He's always resented me, Lorenzo said as dawn began to lighten the sky outside. Our father groomed me to lead because I was ruthless enough to make hard decisions. But Rohan has always been more charismatic, more likable. He thinks that should matter more than it does. So he's trying to prove he's the better choice by destroying everything you've built. Essentially, yes. Lorenzo pulled me against him. We were sitting on the floor now, backs against the wall, watching the city wake up. Including us. He won't succeed. I laced my fingers through his. Because I'm not going anywhere. And together, we're going to figure out how to stop him. Lorenzo kissed my hand. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. I rested my head on his shoulder. So what's our next move? We play his game, but better. Lorenzo's voice took on that cold, calculating edge I recognized from business negotiations. We let him think he's winning. Let him believe he's driven us apart. And we use that false confidence against him. I smiled against his shoulder. I like the way you think. What neither of us knew was that Rohan's final, most devastating move was already in motion. And it would force us to make choices that would change everything. The envelope arrived at my apartment 14 months after the gala. Plain manila, no return address. Shoved under my door sometime in the early morning hours, when even the city's insomniacs had surrendered to sleep. Inside were copies of documents that made my blood turn to ice. Police reports from 5 years ago. Autopsy results. Financial records showing transactions between Lorenzo Patel and the men who'd loaned my father money. And a single sheet of paper with a timeline that connected it all. 5 years ago. Ajay Sharma borrows $150 Zoandal dollars from Patel-controlled lending operation. 4 years, 8 months ago. Unable to repay, Sharma is offered alternative arrangement. Transport packages across state lines, no questions asked. 4 years, 6 months ago. Sharma attempts to back out. Lorenzo Patel personally oversees intervention. 4 years, 5 months ago. Ajay Sharma dies of heart attack in his home. Autopsy shows signs consistent with induced cardiac arrest. Investigation closed as natural causes. 3 months ago, Lorenzo Patel identifies Sharma's daughter as musician, begins surveillance, present. Priya Sharma is exactly where Lorenzo Patel wants her, grateful, indebted, In love with the man who murdered her father. My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers. They scattered across my floor like accusatory confetti. This had to be Rohan's work. Another manipulation. Another fabricated story designed to destroy us. Except the documents looked real. Too real. The police report had correct case numbers. The autopsy was signed by a doctor I could verify existed. The financial records bore Lorenzo's signature. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands, calling the only person I trusted to tell me the truth. Lorenzo answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. "Priya, it's 4 a.m. What's wrong?" "Did you kill my father?" Silence. Long enough that I knew, even before he spoke, that my world was about to shatter. "Where are you?" His voice had gone flat, emotionless. "Answer the question." "I'm coming to you. Don't go anywhere. Don't call anyone. Just wait for me." He ended the call before I could respond. I sat on my floor, surrounded by documents that accused the man I loved of murdering my father, and waited for him to arrive and confirm that everything I believed had been a lie. Lorenzo appeared 20 minutes later, using the key I'd given him 3 months ago when we'd stopped pretending this was temporary. He was dressed haphazardly. Jeans, untucked shirt, no shoes. He must have run from his penthouse. He saw the papers scattered across my floor and went very still. "Rohan sent these," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, clinical. "They say you killed my father. They say you planned this entire thing. Planned me." Lorenzo crouched down, picking up the documents one by one. His expression revealed nothing, but I saw his jaw tighten as he read. "Some of this is true," he finally said. The room tilted. "Which parts?" "Your father did borrow money from my organization. He did agree to transport packages when he couldn't repay. And he did try to back out." Lorenzo set down the papers with careful precision. "But I didn't kill him, Priya. I wasn't even involved in his case. By the time his debt reached my level of oversight, he was already dead. But these documents are real and fabricated." He pulled out his phone, navigating to a secure folder. "The police report is real. Your father's death was investigated, but the autopsy conclusion was natural causes because it was natural causes. He had an undiagnosed heart condition, see here, in the full report that Rohan conveniently didn't include. He showed me a different document, a complete autopsy that detailed congenital heart disease my father had never known about. The financial records showing my signature? Also real, but the dates are wrong." Lorenzo swiped to another image. "These transactions are from 8 months before your father died, when I approved writing off his debt as uncollectible. I didn't order his death. I ordered forgiveness. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But how do I know you're not just showing me more fabricated evidence? You don't." Lorenzo's voice was raw. "You have to choose, Priya. You have to decide whether you believe I'm capable of killing your father and then spending over a year manipulating you into loving me, or whether you believe Rohan is capable of constructing an elaborate lie designed to destroy the only real thing either of us has." My hand moved to the gun I'd started carrying 3 months ago, a small pistol Lorenzo had given me after teaching me to shoot, insisting I needed to be able to protect myself. I pulled it out, the weight familiar in my palm, pointed it at Lorenzo's chest. "If you did this," I said, my voice breaking, "if you killed my father and then made me love you, then shoot me." Lorenzo didn't move, didn't flinch, just held my gaze with these dark eyes that I'd learned to read. "But look at me first, Priya. Really look, and tell me what you see." I looked, saw pain, saw fear, real, genuine fear that had nothing to do with the gun and everything to do with losing me. Saw love that couldn't be faked, not like this, not at 4 a.m. with no audience to perform for. Saw truth. The gun fell from my shaking hands. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I can't do this anymore, I gasped against his chest. I can't keep choosing between loving you and protecting myself. I can't. Then don't. Lorenzo's arms came around me, solid and safe. We end this, tonight. Together. I pulled back enough to see his face. How? By doing what we should have done months ago. We investigate. We find the real truth about what happened to your father. And we prove Rohan's been lying. His voice took on that cold edge. And then we make sure he can never hurt anyone again. For the next 4 months, that's exactly what we did. Lorenzo gave me access to everything: files, surveillance, contacts. We worked with his most trusted people to rebuild the timeline of my father's final year. Interviewed people who'd known him. Tracked down the packages he'd transported. Books, as it turned out. Rare editions being smuggled to avoid import taxes. Nothing sinister. We found the doctor who'd performed the autopsy. He confirmed the heart condition, showed us medical records Rohan had somehow gotten sealed. Explained that my father's death, while tragic, was inevitable. The stress of debt had simply accelerated what would have happened eventually. We discovered that Rohan had been the one handling my father's case. That he'd pushed for harsher terms when my father tried to back out. That he'd been there, in my father's apartment, the night he died. And we found evidence of what Rohan had really done. Manipulated my father's debt. Used it to gain leverage. Orchestrated the stress that triggered the fatal heart attack. Not direct murder, but close enough. Most damningly, we found Rohan's real plan. Fabricate evidence framing Lorenzo for my father's death. Drive me to shoot Lorenzo in grief and rage, then step in to protect me from prosecution, positioning himself as the hero who'd avenged my father and now controlled the Patel Empire with me as his traumatized, grateful trophy. The man was planning my entire future like I was a chess piece with no will of my own. It took 20 months from our first meeting, but we finally had everything we needed. Evidence of Rohan's crimes, proof of his manipulations, and a plan to end this once and for all. The trap was simple: Lorenzo's mother. Natasha Volkov had been right. Rohan was actively destabilizing Lorenzo's alliances, trying to create chaos he could step into and resolve. The Kozlovs, the Romanos, even smaller organizations were all receiving information designed to make them question Lorenzo's leadership. So we gave Rohan exactly what he wanted: an opportunity to prove he was the better choice. We leaked information that Lorenzo's mother, Elena Patel, would be traveling alone to her sister's house upstate. No security, just a driver. A perfect target for someone wanting to send Lorenzo a message. Rohan took the bait. He abducted Elena on a rainy Thursday night, taking her to a warehouse he controlled on the outskirts of the city. Sent Lorenzo a message demanding he step down and transfer control of the entire organization, or he'd never see his mother alive again. Lorenzo went to the meeting alone, as instructed. Walked into that warehouse with his hands raised, looking defeated for perhaps the first time in his life. What Rohan didn't know was that I was already there, had been there for hours, hidden in the rafters with a team of Lorenzo's most loyal people and recording equipment that captured everything. I watched through my scope as Lorenzo entered. Saw his mother tied to a chair, gagged but unharmed. Saw Rohan's triumph as he circled his brother. "Finally," Rohan said, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Finally, you realize you're not invincible." "Let her go," Lorenzo said quietly. "Take the Empire. Take everything. Just let her go." "It's not that simple anymore, brother." Rohan pulled out a gun, the same model he'd given me at the gala with the drugged champagne. "You've made too many enemies, done too many terrible things. Someone needs to clean up your messes." "Like killing Ajay Sharma?" I spoke from my position in the rafters, my voice amplified by the acoustics. Rohan spun, gun raised, searching for me. "Who's there?" "Someone who was there." I climbed down, revealing myself. Behind me, Lorenzo's team emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn. Someone who recorded every word you just said, and who's been recording you for months. I pulled out my phone, projecting the video onto the warehouse wall, a compilation of every incriminating statement Rohan had made, every manipulation he'd orchestrated, including his confession about my father's death that I'd gotten when I'd worn a wire to confront him 3 weeks ago. "This is being live-streamed right now to every major player in the city," Lorenzo said, his defeated posture straightening. "The Kozlovs, the Romanos, every family you've been trying to turn against me. They're all watching you confess to destabilizing our alliances, to killing Priya's father, to kidnapping my mother." Rohan's gun hand shook. You can't. We already did." I crossed to Lorenzo's mother, cutting her restraints. "And your own people are abandoning you as we speak. Check your phone." Rohan did, his face going white as he read message after message from lieutenants and soldiers pledging loyalty to Lorenzo and distancing themselves from the unstable younger Patel. "You played your game well," Lorenzo said softly. "But you forgot something. You're not the only one who knows how to manipulate people. You're just the only one who enjoyed it." Police sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer. Lorenzo had made a deal, evidence against Rohan for corruption charges, in exchange for certain other files being sealed. Rohan would spend decades in prison, but the empire would remain intact. As officers flooded the warehouse, Rohan looked at me with something like betrayal. "I was trying to protect you, give you justice for your father." "No," I said quietly. "You were trying to use my pain to get what you wanted. There's a difference." They took him away, and I watched the man who'd tried to destroy us finally face consequences for his actions. Lorenzo's mother hugged me fiercely. "He finally found someone as clever as he is," she whispered. "Thank you for fighting for him." "Thank you for letting us use you as bait," she laughed. "My son loves you enough to walk into death for you. I think I can handle being bait." 2 years after a drugged champagne glass at a charity gala, I stood in a garden venue overlooking the city, wearing a simple white dress and holding my violin instead of a bouquet. Lorenzo waited at the altar in a charcoal suit, no armor, just himself. His mother sat in the front row, crying. The Kozlovs attended, along with the Romanos and every other family in Lorenzo's world. A wedding that was part celebration, part strategic alliance reinforcement. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the man watching me with tears streaming down his face as I played the final piece I'd performed at the Gilt Lily on the night he'd found me, months after our first meeting, a melancholy variation on a theme he'd heard me practice in secret. I'd learned later that he'd recorded those practice sessions, listened to them on nights when business kept him away, found comfort in music he'd never asked for but couldn't live without. When the piece ended, I set down my violin and walked to him. "I love you," he said before I could speak. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of that." "You already have." I kissed him as our witnesses applauded. "But I'll let you keep trying anyway." We'd transformed his empire, the illegal operations dismantled gradually, legitimized, redirected. He'd created a foundation for young musicians buried in debt, named for my father. A way to turn guilt into something productive. And in quiet moments he played piano while I played violin, two instruments that shouldn't harmonize but somehow did, because we'd learned to make our own rules. The man who'd saved me from a poisoned drink had taught me the most important lesson. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, being honest, choosing each other again and again, through manipulation and lies, and moments when walking away would be easier. It's about trusting that the person holding your heart will guard it as fiercely as they guard everything else they consider worth protecting. And it's about playing music that transforms sorrow into something beautiful, not despite the darkness, but because we'd learned to find light together. When a champagne glass became the beginning of forever, Priya and Lorenzo proved that sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the poison in your drink. It's the person who saves you from it and then changes your entire world. Their story reminds us that love isn't always convenient or safe, but it's worth fighting for when it's real. What would you have done in Priya's place? Trusted your heart or walked away? If this story moved you, click like and share your thoughts in the comments below.